Welcome to our present state versus history on speaker. Here we are focused on the current events of our culture through the principles of our history, trying to make sense of the culture and the mindset of today. I am your host, Ray Mayfield. Okay, folks, here we are again back on the pod. I'm going to talk a little bit today about government and modern politics, I guess, would be probably a best description. There's all kinds of craziness going on in this world today, in this country. Everybody's all hung up on the Olympics and the stuff that's going on over there, and insignificance, because that's our focus today. That's what it's on, the insignificance. We seem to be a society of people that we know more about these trivial activities than we do about the important things that are plaguing our society and why it is we are where we are. You know, we started this podcast a few years back without the intentions of becoming just another talking head out here repeating the local talking points for whichever side of the deal it is. I'm trying to find some solutions, you know. We've come up with the big threes, what I've been calling it, but I've added another one to that list over the years, the big four, I guess we could say. You know, solving this problem in our country is somebody like myself with the lack of background and things that I have can see these solutions. It behoves me to believe that the people in Washington, D.C. and these diplomats that are supposed to be statesmen that we've elected to these positions of honor can't see these same solutions, and I believe they can. I believe they just refuse to acknowledge them, and so we the people are going to have to rise up and take our country back. You see, and before I get into that, I haven't been doing any promotional things like I should. Need to get back to checking us out on our website there at the truegospelchurch.org, where you can get a hold of some of those links to the different resources, information, University of Christian Studies and seminaries. I've recently been invited to a political activist by Joe Sager. You know, I haven't mentioned him for a while either. You know, it takes care of your website things and stuff like that. If you need any assistance in that, check him out. But he's got a Facebook page. Check it out. Political activist, got some good stuff, different sound bites and different things he's putting on there. So I want to put a big shout out for him. Check out Dr. Guy, Sister Kathy's University for your further education. There's all kinds of other website links there for the university. Well, National Center for Constitutional Studies. There you go. Check them out. Good information there for the Constitution of the United States. If you want to get yourself a little bit sharper in the aspects of our Constitution and the effects that it has. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk about today. You know, our country is established as a republic. It's not a democracy. It was established as a republic. Unfortunately, our republic is in such disarray because of these four things that I've been pushing so hard that I've mentioned earlier. I'll get back to is the unfreezing of our state representatives, the appealing of the 17th Amendment and restoring the state's house, the ratification of the Jefferson Amendment to get a hold of the Supreme Court. You know, I've been barking this for a couple of years, and now I find it interesting that we have a so-called sitting president that promoting all these so-called reforms to the Supreme Court. But all of the things that he's bringing to the floor, none of them reflect anything close to what Thomas Jefferson set out for order balance to maintain our separation of powers. What they're trying to do is they're trying to pull some of the same stunts that have been pulled in the past by packing the Supreme Court and just overturning the separation of powers, basically. Roosevelt tried that back in 1936 and wanted to pack the courts because they weren't getting the results they wanted. But you see, we need a Supreme Court that is going to make rulings that are brought before it based completely upon the Constitution. But there again, getting back to the balance of the courts, the Supreme Court, federal Supreme Court, we've been over this before, was not supposed to be seeing issues, matters of the state anyway. The state Supreme Court is supposed to be dealing with that. And so a lot of these issues that they're not pleased with, that they're claiming the courts have made, should have never been in the federal Supreme Court in the first place. They should have been dealt with in the state Supreme Court. But anyway, we're ratifying that Jefferson Amendment. If you read up on what Thomas Jefferson wanted to do and the things he wanted to put in place to get our court systems have a check and balance in order to keep them from legislating from the bench, there's a lot of good information there on that. And the fourth thing that I've added to this is restoring the pure form of the Electoral College, which a lot of people, myself included, did not understand how that was supposed to work until I dug into. And honestly, the things that I dug up when I went to studying about the history of the Electoral College, it was the first time I'd ever heard them. Nobody had ever explained that to me that I'd ever recalled in my past. I didn't know that the Founding Fathers never intended for us to vote for a president of the United States. It's amazing the things that they wrote in there and the reasons for why they did what they did. And there again, like so many of these other things that we've found, that they've wrote down verbatim what we would have if we did things the way we're doing them now. And that's exactly what we got. It's just amazing to me how these things can carry forth. But the main thing I want to talk about today is this idea of modern politics in our society today, because the political process and the politicking that we have going on today, this process was again never supposed to be. You know, there's a big difference between a statesman and a career politician. Now, don't misunderstand, the time that they're in office has nothing to do with it, okay? A career politician, yeah, they're going to be in office for a long time, but a true statesman might serve in some political capacity for a long time as well. The difference between a statesman and a career politician is not their time in office. Okay, the difference is what motivates them. A career politician is doing everything for the ability to be reelected next time around. They don't care about anything except what it takes to keep their job. A statesman is going to be working towards what is good for the next generation and those coming behind him. He's going to operate in the principles that he holds to be true, and he's not going to be concerned about getting reelected. He's going to be concerned about making good decisions that are going to be carried forth for the next generations and the next generations. There's a whole different concept in the mindset that drives somebody's motivations if all they're worried about is keeping their job. The Founding Fathers never intended for people to go to school to learn how to be politicians and then go get jobs in Washington, D.C. and spend the rest of their career just trying to keep their career and hustling the system around so that they can get another election under their belt and go for another term in their so-called interests. These people that we've been allowing to go to school and get a degree in politics and then go to the honorable houses to represent us is nonsense. We need statesmen. We need to be voting for people who are true statesmen, who are going to walk in the place of what's good for the next generation. There's a whole different mindset in that. And then you got these effects of these modern politics and the modern thinking on our society. This is some of the major problems that we have in our society today. Why we have a culture that thinks that socialism is okay, that thinks that the government feeding or controlling most of these things and regulating businesses, and that's all okay, because it's a result of the changing that's been taking place in our culture due to the changes in our Constitution and the mindset of the thinking. Because the reality of it is, we've went over this before in dealing with the Word of God. All forms of government are good because all forms of government are ordained by God. Man needs government. You can see all the way through the scriptures where the promises of God are coming through government. In fact, all the way back into Genesis chapter 8, we find a covenant with Noah where God's establishing government. And I know that theologists they want to argue about that statement I just made is God establishing government there, but they say that God had government and there was law before that, and there was. But the point is the formal establishment of order in those laws was established in that covenant that God made with Noah in Genesis chapter 8. And he sets things in order. He gives Noah the mandate to bring order and bring conclusions to the matter and basically set up government. And then when we get into Exodus chapter 18 and 19, well, we find where the Exodus, where Moses has led the nation of Israel out of bondage, and the formal institutions of civil government and moral government are established in those chapters there. And we see the fundamental building blocks to the government that we have today. We see the separation of powers and the delegation of districts and sections and divisions of things. And then we also see the establishment of the moral government through the priesthood. And the two of those are God's hands extended into society that he might work and move throughout all generations. We have to have a moral compass. Then we have to have a sense of order and duty and right and wrong and laws established, see? And these things have been established for generations and generations, all down through time, through the Word of God in these things. So the reality of it is we only have two types of government. We have the type of government that the people rule the government, or we have the government that rules the people. It doesn't matter what you call it, communism, socialism, hierarchy, the people are either in control or they're not. And unfortunately, the republic that was created here in the United States, that the people were in control of because of the checks and the boundaries and the things that were put in place that we went over just a little while ago, have been eroded to the point to where we now have what is known as an oligarchy, which is a form of the ancient governments of England that we broke away from. And all that is a form of government where all the power has been put into the hands of a few, and most of the time what those few are the rich and the corrupt. And that's what's happened to the United States, because we've allowed this breakdown in our Constitution. So we've allowed these few people behind the curtains pulling the strings. And if nothing else from all of this election nonsense that's went on in the last 6 to 8 years, it ought to be blatantly obvious to everybody in this country that the person that we call the President of the United States is not running this country. There are a group of people in the background. You can call it a shadow government, call it whatever you want to call it, but they're calling the shots. And anybody that can't see that needs to open their eyes, because we have had so many gross violations of our Constitution and the order of our Constitution's operational procedures when it comes to the people. The people are supposed to be in charge. The people are supposed to be making the decisions, but they're not. They're being told what to do. They're being told what they can do. They're being told what not to do. How is that dealing with the modern society of our politics? Well, that is a direct result. The people allowing these things to take place is a direct result of this modern politics. It's the effect that's been taking place on our society for the last 50, 60 years. I've been barking this for a long time. That 1900 generation, 1901, 1905, 1919, you go back and you look in there where they've started changing our Constitution. They started adapting these ideology that we should be working for a working wage. How many times have you heard that? A living wage. We should be focused on a living wage and a working wage, and the workers they deserve fair treatments, and I'm not saying that none of that's true. But what I'm saying is the mindset of the majority has been shifted from what it once was in this nation to something other than what it was. You see, when this nation began, the mindset of most people was to be self-employed, to work for themselves. Now, I'm not dogging having a job. Just hear me out. We're talking about principles here. We're talking about the effects of basic principles that have been propagated in our society and been taught from our school systems in order to change the mindset of the majority of the people, because once these things start to happen, then the focus changes, and it's a natural progression. You see, we have basically a working wage versus self-employment. So what's the difference? How do these principles affect the society? How do they affect the social behavior? Well, first of all, when population started out in this common school of thought, their idea was to take care of themselves, to work for themselves. The common school of thought was, we have to take care of ourselves. Nobody else is going to do that for us. And that's why most people, they were self-employed, because they knew they were on their own. Well, when the natural school of thought is on that, then what is the natural process of the people, of the majority of the society? We have self-reliance. We have self-ability. We know we can do whatever it is. It doesn't mean that we're islands unto ourselves and that we don't need any help, but we know we have that surety that we can get it done. We have that self-confidence, that self-reliance. It's a natural thing that comes through the whole society. And the whole society also will build a sense of community around each other, because we know that we can work together, we can get more done. And if we work together, then we have more security within each other's, because when somebody falls on hard times or what have you, then the more the merrier, if you will. And so that automatically builds a sense of community. That's how most of the towns across this country and these communities got started, was people coming together and settling in a certain area. They had a common goal and a common purpose, and so they created a common civilization, and it grew, and so on and so forth. And another natural progression of that school of thought is that as we're working together, then we can share goods, we can share services. We have basic contents and need. We can share law and order. We can look out for each other. Yeah, on and on and on I can go. These things come in. The natural progression of that school of thought is an understanding of the greater good. We know that we have our own needs and we have to do what we got to do in order to survive, but we also have, the good of the community or the good of the whole. It just becomes a natural progression. And so people begin to work together and they understand that and they understand the cost of business. Excuse me. And so they understand the sense of community and they're working together and growing. And when one prospers, then everybody prospers. And if you have a place that's doing exceptional business and they can hire other people to come and work for them, then the productivity goes up and everybody wins because the business is more prosperous, more lucrative. It's hiring people. They're now making money, on and on and on, and it goes and it grows, and everybody has that understanding and that capacity of things moving forward. It also places a higher value on freedom. It places a higher value on a freedom to come and to go and to move and to operate without interference, because everybody understands that we've got to be free to be able to take care of business. We got to be free to be able to work together and make decisions together, and we got to be free to operate. And it also gives a very clear understanding of risk versus reward. And so through that, the community as a whole has a natural understanding of these things. And there's a lot more to it, but for the sake of time, that's really all I'm going to get into on that. And that's the school of thought of working for yourself, see? So, but today, the natural school of thought is that we go to school and we get educated and then we go to work for somebody. And so what's the natural progression that comes from that word of thought? Well, the natural progression is that we go, once we get to school, we go to work for somebody else, and we're naturally dependent on somebody else for our livelihood. So that self-reliance, that self-ability is immediately kind of diminished just a little bit. And it doesn't mean that we don't have value and self-value in it, but the overall picture is that I am dependent upon another. So now my thought process changes a little bit. It promotes individuality rather than a collective force moving together and working in unity. It promotes us to think more about my needs and my own needs because we're not focused on the greater good so much. It turns our primary focus inward to those necessary needs of our own fulfillment. And because we're relying on somebody else to the capacity, it creates an insecurity within us that we don't even oftentimes realize is there, because we know that there's somebody else that has control over things we cannot control and don't control. So as we continue to grow in that, then it makes freedom less valuable. It gives us the impression that there actually is no real freedom and that we're all, that's just the normal way of life because, after all, none of us are really in control of our own destiny after all anyway. And then it brings us a distorted understanding of reward versus risk, because we don't truly understand the full reward of risk because we never really receive the full reward for the risk, and we don't have to take much risk because, we've got this other person that's taking the risk, and so we're dependent on that. And what that does is it opens the door for the government to become the source of those needs. You see, this is the long-term thing. These are the things that statesmen like Winston Churchill understood. These are the things that the early Americans understood, and they also understood that a free market economy is vital for a free people to remain free. Because it's only in a free market economy that people can create a business, They can work for a reward and understand the cost of that business and understand the implications of that business. And they do not want government encroaching on their ability to do that. But when we have the thought process that, oh, it's just about working a job and we're all dependent on somebody else, then it's a natural thing for us to switch over instead of having business because, after all, these business owners are unreliable and untrustworthy. So we need the government to take control of these businesses, and then we can count on the government to be that source of supply, and we won't have such insecurity within ourselves. But the reality of it is, the larger the organization or institution that controls the majority of the resources, the more corruption becomes integrated. The smaller the number of people, it's no different than when the king was ruling in the very beginning of these days of our Constitution. The king was corrupt. The king wanted it all. The king got greedy. And if you go back and look at the history and understand how this country got started in the first place, it was all based on the king spent a bunch of money to get us out of the French and Indian War, and he was trying to recover his capital investment back through taxes and through an iron fist on the colonies, and the colonies wanted freedom to operate their businesses and to move in operation towards the things that they wanted to, not the king. And the king said that they were all property of the kingdom because they had invested so much money to get us out of the mess, and therefore the fight began. And so now we have went full circle all the way back to create a government that almost mirrors the aristocrat of the king's government, only now it has a outward appearance of a republic, but yet it's operating as an oligarchy, can't pronounce the word. And we need to restore our republic and take the power back and put it in the hands of the people. And the only way we're going to do that is to ratify the true First Amendment, unfreezing the state representatives, appealing the 17th Amendment, ratifying the Jefferson Amendment. And the more I look at this electoral college, I think we need to restore the original version of the electoral college and go back to having our president and vice president picked out and chosen by the electorals that are assigned the responsibility to find us a candidate that's worthy of our presidency and get this modern popularity contest brought to an end. And I can see I'm way out of my time again, so I hope that this gives you some food to think about. These are some principles that are the basic fundamentals about the nature of man and how these things come to pass. And this is how they've twisted our society into believing the nonsense, but the Word of God says that in the last days He will send a strong delusion that they might believe a lie. And I believe that there is no better description than delusional for our society today. So nevertheless, keep looking up, don't weaken, and until we meet again on the pod, have a wonderful day.